those of you who have not yet talked to me, my name is Marc. I'm from the University of Applied Sciences in Ingolstadt. And yeah, I brought a, from my perspective, very interesting topic with me today. And also maybe one that some of you don't have, well, the proper knowledge yet. So maybe as a first question is, before we start, who thinks that she or he knows what pathology is about? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, who of those thinks it has to do mostly with dead people? Okay, spoiler, it doesn't. Pathology is actually mostly about living people and characterizing diseases with living people. Okay, so let me start, and my talk is entitled Precision Pathology on the Potentials of AI-assisted Pathology and, well, how we can go and leverage them. So let's start and introduce you a little bit to the workflow of pathology. So it usually starts with some tissue. So not with some like insects or whatever else people might now think about when watching CSI. It usually starts with some tissue, and the question of this, if this tissue is, for example, a tumor, and if, then is it a malignant tumor or a benign tumor? That's usually the question. And this tissue is then so-called embedded. First of all, it's placed in formaldehyde, and then it's embedded in wax, so that it will be then pretty solid. And so we can then cut very fine sections of it. I mean, I think most of you have seen such a microscopy slide before, right? Do you have any idea like how thin such a slide of tissue is? Okay, those who said that they are knowledgeable about pathology can now be. It's actually less. So typically, the slides that we're dealing with are cut at 1 micrometer. Yeah. So, but the order of magnitude was correct. So this is typically our order of magnitude. And then this slide is being placed under a microscope, and an expert, a pathologist, will have a look at it. And will then write a report about that. Right, so stating, okay, I see these kinds of characteristics, and this is what I then finally conclude. Okay, so this workflow is, as the time of speaking, mostly a completely analog workflow. So there's no digital part involved here, as you can see. And especially in Germany, this is still 95% of diagnosis is done like this. So really the completely analog way. And I think this might be surprising for those of you who are all into like digital business models and so on. There is nothing digital involved here. Maybe this goes into the hospital information system nowadays, but that's about it. So fully analog. So what can we do about that? I'm a professor for image understanding. So that means that I want to have a digital image. So what we typically nowadays do is that we digitize those tissue slides. So we place them into a so-called slide scanner, and in this slide scanner, it will be then transformed into a digital image. Now, just to give you a glimpse of an idea about what level of detail we get here. So we want to do an analysis on cell level. That means that we have to have a magnification of around about 400 times. And that means that our image will be in the order of 100,000 pixels times 100,000 pixels. Pretty severe image, right? So each image is in the order of 1 to 3 gigabytes. That's a couple of storage that we need for that. And it also means that it takes some time to analyze this, and that also the sheer amount of data that is there is really hard to analyze for a human. Of course, the people that study this, they are fairly good at this, but still there is some room for improvement, as our research also has shown. So let me start with a very bold statement. AI is there to replace pathologists. Okay, well, maybe I have to put an asterisk there, right? I don't think that this is really true. But this is the fear that is there at the moment. And this is one of the reasons why it is still so analog in many ways. So let's dismantle this kind of statement in the following like 30 minutes or so. And let's have a brief insight into that. So when we talk to pathologists, then we are typically met with the following questions. So do we really need those digital tools? We always did it analog, it worked like that. Are we less efficient actually if we have to digitize slides in the first place, right? It's also extra effort to put them into the scanner and press scan. Is this digital image even diagnostically equal, right? So can I get the same information from that digital slide than I can get from the analog slide? And if I have some kind of algorithm in the diagnostic process, does it maybe interfere with me as the diagnostic, the pathologist? Now, these are all questions that kind of fuel I would still call it a fear-led debate. So I recently talked to a friend of mine who is a radiologist, and he said that they did a poll in like the universities, and they asked the people that are going into radiology, who of you thinks that AI has a potential to get you unemployed? Right? 70% said, I think that's true. So this tells us a lot about the perception of AI nowadays, not so much about what we are doing with it. Okay, so this is the outline of my talk. Now, after all of this pretext, here's some outline of my talk. First of all, I want to show how to increase quality and efficiency in pathology using AI tools, and also where we can really start and set off to deliver. Then also like requirements that are still partially not fulfilled towards like a computer-aided diagnosis, and also how can we then transform this into medical process, which is kind of a different part of that, right? So efficiency and quality is from the status quo, and the progress is of course also like being able to diagnose more than we currently do. Starting off with the first part. So what are humans really good at? Well, humans are really good at like making sense of unstructured data. We just had a discussion at our table that's stating that like the medical report will typically vary strongly from person to person, like abbreviations vary and all these kinds of stuff varies from rater to rater. But still, we as humans, we have no problem with that. So we can still make sense of that. Also, we can incorporate diverse information from multiple modalities. So we can include the lab results, we can integrate over all of this, right? To make sense of all of this. What we as humans are not good at, and I will really say humans are not good at, that doesn't mean that pathologists in general are worse or better in any way. We're not good at processing large amounts of structured data. And to anyone who claims that we are, yeah, so why do we do statistics then, right? This is the perfect example of that. Also, we're not really good at predicting complex behaviors and relationships. This is also what we're not good at, else we wouldn't want to look at the weather forecast. And this is actually what AI is really good at. In the contrary. So AI is really good at processing large amounts of structured data and predicting complex behaviors and relationships, and not really good at making sense of unstructured data, incomplete data, and yeah, incorporating from multiple various sources only with a tiny amount of information. So this is where we can start, and let's do like a case study or several case studies for task automation that we can do in this world. So as I said, we have to do with microscopy images. And if we talk about annotating microscopy images, this is partially the status quo. You see what has happened here, right? So we see a microscopy slide, and someone annotated that this part was taken for diagnosis with a pen on the slide. Yeah, that's the status quo. It still is, because of course, if you don't have a digital image, how else would you document that? So there's, of course, like countless possibilities of better documenting stuff if you have a digital image in the first place. Now, then there's other tasks. For example, this is from cytology. This is from the task of diagnosing asthma. which you can do. In this case, it was done on a horse, but you can do this the same way on humans, where you take some sample from lung fluids that you take a saline solution, put it into there, suck it out, you get some cells out, and then you know how many cells should be like erythrocytes, how many cells should be, and so on and so on. So you know which kind of cells should be there in what kind of proportion. And then to do the diagnosis, this is being counted. So the person sits there and clicks through them and counts this. So this is nothing that I would want to do professionally, because it's actually a really tedious job. And also, like, differentiating those kind of cells is something that an AI model can really do well. So this is something where we should really say, okay, this is something where we can easily start. So this is also from our own research here. Yeah, so in this case, let me zoom out a little bit for you. This is what the actual image looks like. So this is now cytology. So we have here round about 16,000 macrophage cells, 10,000 lymphocyte cells, and so on and so on and so on. And of course, the more cells I sample, the more accurate my diagnosis will be. Right, so this is something that we can very easily do with a computer-aided system. So another task worth automating. This here in the middle is a so-called mitotic figure. That's a cell that's dividing. Maybe some of you now think, yeah, biology, I remember, mitosis. Okay, so it's a cell that's dividing at the moment. And what we're looking at here now is tumor tissue. And if we have lots and lots of cells that are dividing in a tumor, then you would also think, okay, there is some tissue growth, right? Cells are dividing and getting more and more and more, so there's some tissue growth. So this is a diagnostic marker. So the more cells that we have that are dividing, let me highlight this for a little bit for you. The more cells that we have dividing, the worse this is as a prognostic marker for the tumor, because it means the tumor is growing and also maybe spreading. Okay, so this of course has consequences in the treatment, right? Going for chemotherapy, going for radiotherapy, and so on. So again, this is now with the full magnification. We can now identify the cell. And of course, a well-trained pathologist will be able to do that. Now, again, let me zoom out for you. And we can see that this is actually the tissue. And now these points in green are the automatically detected cell events. So they are automatically detected mitosis. And okay, in this case, it's a really malignant tumor. It was a breast cancer in this case, and in this case it indicates that something is really going on here. So it's fast growing. So what's actually really important for the diagnosis is not how many cells are there in totally that are dividing, but maybe even if we have a region where there's lots and lots of cell growth happening, because it may just be that in some other parts the tumor is benign. That doesn't matter for the diagnosis, because if it's malignant in one part, then this is the determinative part of that, right? So we actually need to find out the density of those cells in the microscopy tissue. And this is a task that is clearly something that a human cannot easily do. Still, it's part of the grading at the moment. So grading saying is the tumor malignant or benign. Yeah, so these are stuff that we did in the past. We also tried to find out now how good are humans at finding this region of the highest density of those cells. So this is another sample here. We have here in green, the green dots, I hope you can see them, are these cells that are dividing. And as I said, the region where there's the most activity is determinative for the tumor behavior. So this is around this region here up there. And now we asked, I think it was 11 pathologists, please tell us in which region, of course not knowing this computer-aided stuff here, right? In which region do you think there is the most activity? Now, this was the result. As you can see, it was more or less spread over the tumor, and we can also see that it was not really well predictive of where is the most active region. So let's have a look at the histogram here. Histogram shows us that most found a region where there's 3 of those cells. Some found one where there's 4, 5, or 6. None found the region up there in cyan color, this one here, which had a count of 10. And this was now exactly, so the question is, when do you consider it rather benign? When do you consider it rather malignant? Of course, also including other criteria. Well, there's the cutoff. So this was what we would call at least borderline malignant tumor, and none of the human experts found out. Not because they were bad trained or they were just not capable of doing this task. It's just a task that is ill-posed for humans. So we see that there's actually quite some potential in that, right? Using this vast amount of data that we have there, and to integrate over that is something that is not a well-posed task for humans. So there is countless those specialized tasks that can be partially or fully automated in the field of pathology. Also, if we do automate this, then we can, of course, expect more productivity and also more diagnostic reproducibility. All of that we have shown in our research. However, this change is subject to the availability of robust computer-aided diagnosis tools, right? So if I don't have the tools, then the digital image itself doesn't help me a lot. Okay, coming to the second point of my talk. What are the requirements that we still need in order to build those tools for our pathologists? And as you can see, apparently we already built some of them, else it wouldn't have been possible to do this. But in order to really be on a high standard, we have to have like great algorithms. Let's put it like that, right? So whatever great exactly means, but they have to be at least as good as a good human expert on the same task. And for that, in order to make that possible, we need a close cooperation between the disciplines. So between computer sciences, machine learning, and pathology in this case. And in order to train our machine learning algorithms, our AI algorithms, we do need great data sets. So high quality, high quantity data sets. So it is really sensible to invest in those data sets. Well, how much so? Let's have a look here again to our case. So we went through the pain of creating such a big data set, which enabled us to do the whole investigation in the first place. Typically, we only had like this region of the tumor annotated. So there someone sat down and said, okay, here is one, there's one, there's one, there's one. Okay. Because of course, like annotating this whole thing is a lot of effort. And who would want to do that? The physicians, they're always busy with stuff. They don't have time for that. Luckily, we had some veterinary pathologists who had time for us and went with us through the pain of doing that. And by this, we had a 60 to 80 times increase in the annotations. And of course, also in the generalization of these annotations. Yeah, so what does this mean for us? So if we now compare the recognition rate here as F1 score on a detection model, then we can see we got a recognition rate of 0.68. Okay, you might not think, yeah, but what does it compare to, right? I can always show fancy numbers, but what does it really mean? So this was what we had as the state-of-the-art model. So we were pretty much in the same area. So we trained a model and restricted that to this small area that I've shown you. It's called 10 high power fields that reflects 10 times looking at the highest magnification for a pathologist. It's some 2 square millimeters. If we just train a model on half of that size, we see that it significantly deteriorates. If we train it on the full slide, as we now can do, then we see that the performance goes up significantly, up to a F1 score of 0.82. Okay, again, what does that mean, right? So how would I know if that's sufficient or if that's good? I wouldn't. We also investigated another thing. Maybe I don't want to talk about that now. But we also did an investigation on the same tumors, like how good are humans. So we had a so-called ground truth because we did a special immunohistochemistry staining against that. And we found out that the range of human experts is actually in this range. So not too bad, I would say, right? So apparently, if we have the right data sets, then we are capable of outperforming at least the average, and we are in the same region as our best experts. That's kind of nice. Yeah, so we also said, okay, but we don't want to compete against the experts, but we want to join them. So we want to enable them to be better in their diagnostic work. So we did a computer-aided annotation or identification of those cells. And then we found out, now this is a receiver operating curve or precision recall curve in this case. And of course, we want to have a highest possible precision while having at the same time a highest possible recall. And now here we have the red dots, which were all our individual participants, and the green dots, which were the participants with the aid of the algorithm. And of course, like more to the upper right is better. And we see that each individual expert had an increase in the recognition performance using this AI tool. This is now the so-called F1 scores here again for each of the experts, and this is now without the AI tool, and this is with the tool. So we can see that, in fact, we improved for each and every one of them. Yeah, so next step, of course, is let's try to bring that into clinical practice. That would be extremely awesome, wouldn't it? So we sat together with some partners from different institutions, like 3 Dutch institutions actually, because they actually already have fully digital workflows. So they have the images that we need. And we did a challenge on that, and all good. And in the end, we were able to implement this into their clinical information system. Well, this all worked out because we were all led by a common good, because we wanted to all make this detection more robust to be able to bring it into a clinical environment. And maybe just to get an estimate, so what do you think was our project budget for this? Yeah. So, yeah, this was all on voluntary basis. So, because we were all like curious if it would work out. Yeah, and this tells you like how performant academia can be if the right people are involved and the right incentives are involved, right? So we wanted all to bring this forward and see this working. And I have some demo with me that my colleague Nicolas Statonikos from UMC Utrecht provided me. And this is now their clinical information system that they have there. It's actually a custom built system from the university. So as I understand at least, or at least they have their own interfaces. They can integrate their own tools into it, and they develop their own tools. And in this case, they used, so this is now a pathology slide, and they use this prediction. And now the expert can go and see, okay, so these are the 3 regions where the algorithm thinks it is most likely to have those cells in the highest density. And then they can now go over it and say, okay, yeah, this is true, this is true, this recognition is also true, and maybe this one was not. So this is negative, and then at the very end, they are at a, they will get a result of that. And of course, like comparing this to the usual workflow where you would have to look for all of them, this is much more efficient to do that now. Also, they're much less likely to miss a hotspot region where there's a lot going on. Yeah, so we're pretty happy with how that turned out to be. Yeah, so it turns out you can achieve quite a lot without a budget if you have the right people involved, of course. And you have also some freedom to do what you want to do in your job. Yeah, so I think that change in the field is about to come, and I think also that it might be disruptive. So at the moment, we still have 95%, that's my gut estimate, of pathology still working analog. And I'm not saying that they are, in principle, doing a bad job. I mean, they're mostly not, of course. But I think that the benefits from going digital will be so strong that we will see a change. And I think it will be a rather disruptive change because it also involves getting used to the tools and also some investments, right? So to really change a complete workflow from fully analog to fully digital means quite a lot of change. And especially if you're in your own clinic, then why would you want to do that if you don't have a real incentive? So at the moment, this is where we are at, right? So we have, like especially in many university hospitals, we do have those scanners that can digitize those slides, but they are mostly used for research, not for diagnosis, mostly. While at the moment this is still something like if you want to do it and you get some research funding, then you can do this. I think it will become a hygiene factor soon, because if some hospitals are using it and showing that they are actually faster, that are more accurate, more reproducible, all this can be shown, then of course this is something that also the clinics will ask their departments, so why don't you do that, right? So shouldn't we go through the investment here and do that? And then, of course, if you resist it for long, then, of course, it takes much longer time to adapt to the new world. All right, so let me summarize the second point. So I think that we already do have algorithms that achieve expert-level results. And combining that with the knowledge of the expert that they already have, especially in terms of robustness, where algorithms are still lacking a little bit behind, we can really set a new standard for diagnostic accuracy. Well, problem is, however, that for many domains, datasets of sufficient quantity and quality are at the moment still missing. So no one wants to go through the pain because they are all, in their daily work, they're doing diagnostics all day. But however, what we can expect is that computer-aided diagnostic workflows, they will exceed unaided diagnosis, for sure, in the long run. Right, that was the second point of my talk. Now coming to the third point. So now we said, okay, so there is quite some tasks that we can automate to do better, to be more efficient, to be more accurate and reproducible. But let's look a little bit into the future. And of course, I cannot avoid the topic of big data here. Even though we still have many problems with GDPR and so on and getting access to that data. But in principle, I'm fairly sure that deep learning will revolutionize the cancer diagnosis. And I have some first proof. That's not our own work, but I still want to show it to you. So if we are looking, for example, into the diagnosis of breast cancer, for breast cancer, what you typically do at the moment is that you do not get only this kind of tissue. So this is, of course, stained, it's colored, it's dyed with some chemicals that make it look like this purplish and so on. You will typically also take the tissue and use it with some other dyes, and these reveal some characteristics of the tissue. For example, if it is if it has strong estrogen receptors in it. This gives you some clues about how to treat that cancer properly, so you can much more efficiently target that. So that means that in a typical diagnostic workflow for breast cancer, you have tissue that is cut and stained with different chemicals. All of these, of course, need to be paid, right? It costs something. It's not really, it's not thousands of euros, but also not tens of euros. You will then have those images. All of them will someone will have a look at, and will also categorize them and tell them, okay, is this rather active or inactive? And of course, there's lots of space in between. So we do all of this in order to find out what we call tumor subtypes, right? So because cancer is not a disease, it's thousands of diseases. And it's all depending on the mutation that we actually have. So the mutation from the healthy cell to the cancer cell that is deregulated. Well, now, what is current research, and this is really current stuff, so 2020, 2021, showing? First of all, it's showing that we can derive the same information, at least pretty much, also from this stain above here. So we don't actually, or we might look into a future where we actually don't need these, because AI will be able to derive these for us. So this is one of the things that makes me kind of hopeful. The other thing is that, so how do we actually get to those subtypes? Well, they would typically be linked to some kind of different behavior of the tumor, so some kind of clinical behavior. But mostly we will actually get those subtypes by some kind of cluster analysis in the genomics. So we take some samples, do some gene sequencing, do some cluster analysis, and then find some groups there. We can do the same thing actually on the images, Because, I mean, the very same thing, the very same genetic defect that will turn some tissue into like growing will set some traces here in the tissue. So, I mean, the reason because we do have the genetic defect which leads to a tumor growth. So that means that we will also have some reflectance of that very genetic defect in the patterns that we see here. It's just logical that we can assume this. So we can also use an AI to directly analyze which subgroup do we have from the tissue. So this is also has already recently been shown that this is possible. I'm not sure if I have it in here. Hold on. Oops. No, I don't have it in here. Yet, still, we should see that while we're now doing like some kind of molecular subtyping and so on, and categorizing of tumors in order to be able to then do some kind of research on them, like building groups, building also a control group and so on, and then treat them and see what is the therapy outcome. This is all very small sets of people. So typically our experiments in this region are like, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 people. And that means that we will have to categorize in order to have some meaningful results here. However, biology is rarely categorical, right? So it's rarely on and off. So there's something in between. And in that term, let me introduce you to the concept of the hourglass of variance, something that I came up with some time ago. And just to show you, so we have pathology. Pathology means something that deviates from the normal. And there's like so many different variations that can happen that then lead to something that is put together as a diagnosis. So you have breast cancer of this kind of type. Then there's a therapy group, and then we have some kind of therapy outcome. However, this means that from here to there, we're already grouping. So we're already putting groups together. This is not reflecting the fact that these are still different pathologies here. They're just grouped now. And of course, the outcome here will be noisy. So it means that in some cases it works, in other cases it doesn't work. Why? We don't know, because we have actually thrown the information already away when grouping. So this is, from my point of view, one of the biggest potentials that we have here. By having access to really vast number of clinical data here, to images, also to therapy outcomes, we can make much nicer assumptions about which kinds of group there actually really exist, so which really behave different in the treatment, which we are at the moment not able to do. All right, so this would then lead to a kind of workflow that I would hope that it will come, where we take like all kinds of clinical data, we anonymize it, of course. It's not that difficult in pathology, as you might see here. It's not, it doesn't look so individual, those tissue patterns. We all collect that in a big data lake, and then we can run analysis. At the moment, this is, of course, still very much in its early stages, but this is something that I would hope that we would be able to see, and then really be able to fine granularly see which leads to diagnosis or which leads to a better diagnosis. And this we could then really call a so-called precision medicine, right? So this is always the term that is used, so a very individual treatment for a patient. But as long as we are still grouping patients into large groups in order to make them able to run a study population, it's not really individual. Okay. So that was my third point already. So let me summarize that. So we don't actually know how many relevant subtypes of like each kind of disease there are actually. It's just something that we have known from experience, but there's some truth that might be hidden there. Also, we need access to large-scale data sets in order to explain this variance and also to predict better outcomes. And large-scale data collection is required, but at the moment it's really strongly limited by data exchange, right? So whenever we're talking to clinicians, they're always like fearful of, oh, if I exchange data with you, will this be a problem in terms of GDPR? And it's more a fear-driven thing, like focused on the innovation. And that's actually one of my biggest concerns at the moment, if I'm honest. So let me summarize the talk with a bit of a negative note now, right? But let me summarize my talk briefly. So the diagnostic accuracy and efficiency can strongly be improved, so coming back to the positive parts, if we use computer-aided diagnosis in my field of pathology, but of course also radiology and all in image-guided systems. The algorithms for this are already there. So we have shown all of these nice results with standard algorithms. We didn't tune them a lot. It was just standard stuff that we took out of the box. We applied them on these well-curated data sets, and it worked really well. So what's missing is the data at the moment. And I would be hopeful, actually, that especially the heads of the clinics would wake up and see like how much potential there is in order for them to be more efficient with the data. Because at the moment, what's happening is that startups are coming and trying to derive those solutions, and then, of course, everyone's again dependent on what they will offer. Big data collections are the prerequisite towards personalized cancer care. I think I have also shown this point nicely. And at the moment, this is what's missing. And I would hope that, especially on the European level, we see this more research-centered approach now coming forward. Okay, so let's fix this statement finally, right? This provocative statement, which I started my talk with. So I don't think that this is true. So artificial intelligence will not replace pathologists, but I think we can rearrange it a little bit and say that in the future, pathologists using AI will replace pathologists not using AI. This is, I think, not too bold to state. And with that, I would like to conclude my talk.